Bring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Charger Bolt Family, Brewery X, and Manscaped. Make sure to use the promo code LAFB20 to get 20% off your next purchase. Go to manscaped.com for more details. If you're joining us on YouTube, you make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And, of course, if you're taking us in over the podcast venture, you can find us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you choose to digest your weekly podcast. Dan, another training camp positional battle is on the docket for today. This is like probably the most, as far as when you ask anybody, and we've talked about this, the level of excitement. Who are you most excited to see play this year, and why is it Derwin James? The training camp battle is nothing but the safety position. And this is an interesting one because much like it is with some of the positions we've talked about in the past, beyond the starters, it's kind of a big question mark.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's this is going to be a really fun episode because I think we get to talk about guys we really haven't talked about much so far this offseason. We all know about Derwin James and Nas Adderley. We all have heard and seen stories of Alohi Gilman, who we drafted last year. Mark Webb, we drafted. Ben DeLuca, we get to talk about today.
Ben DeLuca.
Sorry, Ben DeLuca. Did I say Ben DeLuca? Also get to talk about Ben DeLuca, not to be confused with Ben DeLuca. A lot of different versatile type of players, some of which could have some overlap. Personally, I don't see all of these guys making the roster, but we'll get into that in a sec. All of these guys are kind of led by Coach Ansley and Renaldo Hill. Like you mentioned, everyone is so freaking excited and ready to see Derwin James back in pads. I don't think I've been more excited for a single player to make a outing than I have Derwin James since I can remember. He's that good. I think there's a recent poll that came out that had him ranked as the 9th best safety.
You have a lot to say about that.
I understand that he has been injured, but I guarantee you no GM or coach in the NFL, if you ask them to draft a quarterback, draft a safety, given all of the safeties in the NFL, 8 are not going before him. I understand if you don't want to be in the top 3 or maybe top 5, but 9, that is insane. So we're going to talk about position battles with safeties. We're going to talk about each one of these guys, where we see them fitting, and maybe who doesn't make the cut if they don't. But let's just kick this off, Jake. Derwin James, Brandon Staley, Renaldo Hill. We get to talk about star, money, strong safety, interceptions, fumbles, coverage. I mean, you name it. Derwin James is the Swiss Army knife that every defensive coach dreams of.
When was like the last time that, I know when it was. Obviously, we're talking about 2018 here. But can you remember, just talking about a player, think about any player for this Chargers team that you were this hyped up to see again. And as long as 2020 has been for us in our daily lives, think of the last time that we saw Derwin James play on the field. And I'm not talking about the, 3 or 4 games that he ended up returning in 2019 when he was still coming back from an injury. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the 105 tackle, 13 pass defended, 6 quarterback hit, 3.5 sack, and 3 interception rookie season.
All
Derwin
pro.
James. I mean, it feels like we haven't seen this guy in forever, and truthfully, we haven't. But again, when was the last time that you were this hyped up to see a guy return to the field? Remember what Twitter was like when they just heard the news that Derwin James was fully cleared to be doing practices and OTAs and all that stuff? Remember how like rejoiceful Chargers Twitter was when that news came down? I mean, the hype is just insane. And yes, who is your favorite player to see play in 2021, and why is it Derwin James?
Derwin James, you could argue, is the most important part of this Chargers defense. Some could say Joey Bosa.
I don't think that's an argument at all.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how this defense performed without him versus with him, and it's night and day. He is probably the MVP of this team. He is the bona fide leader, and it's really remarkable how quickly he became a leader of this team on and off the field. Jake, I don't know if you saw he had a thing with Sean Merriman where they were playing beer pong and answering quick Q&As to each other as they were getting balls in the cups. He is by far the most competitive person I have ever seen. Like literally calling his shots, making up, like it's insane. But just seeing how much joy he gets in competing in general. And Sean Merriman asked him, like, let's say you guys win the bowl this year. Like, who's going to be the most hyped on offense, defense? Offense, he picked Keenan Allen. On defense, he thought about it for a second. He's like, oh, it's probably going to be me. It's probably going to be me. Derwin James is such a freak athlete, and he is the lifeblood of this defense. And it's interesting, especially for a defense and a coach like Ben Staley. His role is going to be critical, and he is going to be showcased so much. And he is probably, if not the main reason, definitely top 3 why Brandon Staley took this job.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue there's a number of reasons that Brandon Staley took this job, but if Derwin James isn't in one of them, I think he's lying.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, Dan, to me, there is no argument. Derwin James is the most critical piece to this defense, and it shows. The common denominator for this defense was Derwin James barely played over the past 2 seasons. And it was like Gus Bradley lost a Cadillac converted to a car and couldn't figure out how to start the damn thing. It didn't feel like it worked properly without him. And again, that's a variety of different things, whether it's personnel, whether it's coaching schemes, not being able to adapt to a certain player going out, whatever. But the common denominator to me, when you look at the stats on how this defense suffered compared to how this defense thrived when he was in the lineup in 2018, there is no argument. There is no argument to that. Joey Bosa, okay, as dominant as a pass rusher as he is, you could hope that you would get production of, at the time, a Melvin Ingram or an Uchenna Nwosu or any other rusher that we had. Yes, he's the best rusher on this team, no doubt about it. But you could always hope that you could get something out of him out of who was playing across from him if Joey wasn't on the field. You can't do that with Derwin James. There is nobody on this roster right now that could step in to his role and fill that level of an impact if he is not on the field.
Probably one of the most obvious statements I'm going to say in the history of Chargers Unleashed. Derwin James is going to be your starting strong safety. No questions asked. We could just pencil that in. No need to talk about it.
No.
and again, just to kind of quick overview, there's strong safety and there's free safety. Now, for folks who are kind of questioning what the difference is, we'll talk about it in a sec, but in short, strong safety, imagine them being stronger guys, more in the box, closer to the line of scrimmage. Free safeties are more rangy, more lengthy, more athletic, and usually kind of on the backside of plays, used as kind of like your safety valve. Either your last line of defense usually plays further from the line of scrimmage. Derwin James, again, one of the freaks who can actually probably play both. But if we want to get technical, he would be starting strong safety. And then the next guy we're going to talk about, Nas Adderley, I believe, is going to be the starting free safety if we started tomorrow. As excited as we were about Derwin James, one of the things we talked about it before, Daniel Jeremiah said it as soon as Nas Adderley was drafted by the Chargers, that he was the perfect pairing for Derwin James in the safety position. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to see it literally once. So hopefully we get to see that now. And the reason for that perfect pairing, Nas Adderley, if there's one thing you could say about him, he is a ball hawk. Now, he went through a little bit of growing pains last year. He took some bad angles, so to speak. He also was injured. If you haven't got a chance to listen to his episode where we actually got to interview Nas Adderley on Chargers Unleashed, go and check it out. He is healthy now. He has a much, much better coaching staff. I think the scheme fits him more, lets him play to his abilities. I don't think he was able to do what he did best last year. I am super bullish on Nas Adderley. I think both of us have been since we drafted him. I don't want to be the Chargers homer like always, but this safety squad, like literally 1 through 3, 4, like really has a chance to be special. And we'll get into some of the other guys in a bit, but Nas Adderley is so complimentary to Derwin James because he can go sideline to sideline in a hurry, and those instincts are on point. So as long as he gets that coaching and is healthy, I think folks are going to get a rude awakening, especially the folks who had kind of given up on Nas Adderley.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the president of the Nas Adderley fan club, Mr. Dan Wolkenstein.
Choo-choo.
How about that for a hype rant? Well done, Dan. Very nice. And I'm not far behind you. I was one of the individuals that we've been waiting for this for 2 years. We didn't get a chance to see it for the obvious injury reasons. Derwin being out, even Nas Adderley had his share of injuries during his first season. And then last year we had Derwin go out just before the start of the season. So we didn't get any of that. If I could say what's one of the biggest things that I'm anticipating for the 2021 season, seeing the pairing of Derwin James and Nas Adderley is at the top of the list. It really is, because I would love to see what a dynamic 1-2 punch of these two guys that play both of their respective safety positions so well can do for this defense. And there's been so much rotation, especially when you have a player like Derwin James and when you solidify that strong safety spot. And then when you see that beyond Nas Adderley, or even before Nas Adderley was even here, come on, we dabbled a little bit with Jaleel Adai playing free safety, for crying out loud. That's how depleted. That's how depleted our safety position was. You dabbled with Jaleel Adai at the free safety position for just a little bit. I mean, come on, we don't need to go down that road again.
No, please don't.
These two positions need to be fixtures and staples of this defense. And I don't know if you heard this, Dan, but it was Tyler Sullivan from CBS Sports has called his shot, essentially, and has picked Nas Adderley as his under-the-radar player for the Chargers, who could potentially have that breakout year for 2021. And he went into a whole spiel as far as, obviously the injuries, how Gus Bradley utilized him wasn't the best. And this kind of goes into what Nasir had said to us when we had him on the show. He feels that in this defensive scheme that he could be more of himself, much like what he was doing at Delaware, being able to play his type of football the way that he wants to. And he has that versatility to do it. And if you're talking about Brandon Staley and Coach Hill, and as far as how they're going to utilize him, if you can use a versatile weapon like Derwin James the way that he was used in 2018, Adderley has, maybe not to the same degree, but he has enough versatility that you can move him down in the box, have him in on blitzes a lot more. As you mentioned in the earlier show, the money backer position at times, you could put Nasir Adderley in these positions and have him thrive if you can do it well with a coaching staff that could unlock the potential that he possibly has going into year 3.
As we're sitting here talking about this, I'm just getting like kind of giddy, and I'm having to like compose myself because like this is what we have been waiting 3 years for. And I cannot wait. I am so hyped to see Nas Adderley healthy and with a coaching staff and a scheme that is going to play to his strengths. Now, Jake, you mentioned the term star and money, which for those who don't know, star is kind of like that. I don't know how to explain. It's like a nickel / corner safety hybrid where they can play both safety, but they're also bulky where they can be up and against the run. They can cover. They can also tackle. That's kind of that star role. And it really takes someone who is athletic and is somebody that can kind of do multiple things at once. So you don't really know what he's going to be doing for you. The guy out of Georgia, Mark Webb, is a star type of player. Star in quotes, not star player like Derwin James. Alohi Gilman, I think, is also in that category. And I think Ben DeLuca a bit, which we'll talk about a little bit, is also kind of in that category. So not as much so, in my opinion. But do you want to go Mark Webb or Alohi Gilman next?
Surprise me.
All right. Let's go older first. Let's do Alohi Gilman. So Alohi Gilman is kind of that tweener. And we talked to Chris Harry previously, and we talked about potentially, Kaiser White kind of playing that hybrid role. Alohi Gilman is kind of that similar role where he can play. He's kind of in that tweener linebacker safety role. And that's kind of what he did when he was in college, Notre Dame as well. We saw a little bit of him in 2020, but not much. Alohi Gilman is kind of like the underbelly. I don't necessarily think that he is going to be one that's going to be pushing for a starting job. But I think he is someone that will be helping both on special teams as well as potentially as kind of a secondary depth piece. Do you foresee any scenario in which Alohi Gilman is safety 2?
No. And I'm saying that not because of his playing ability. I'm saying it because I'm not speaking it into existence. The only 2 safeties that should be on the field are Derwin James and Nas Adderley. Case closed. Don't ask me.
Now, what about, okay, so I'm saying safety 2 in terms of strong safety. So if,
I get what you're saying.
Or free safety. So
don't put that out into the universe. You know what I mean?
behind either Derwin or Nazir, who is the next in line, do you think?
This is tough. This is tough because, you have Alohi Gilman who brings value on special teams. Obviously, he's been with the team longer, 1 year longer than Mark Webb. There wasn't the good thing for Alohi Gilman, I'll say this, is that he's being thrust into an opportunity here. When you go back and you look at what this safety depth chart looked like last year before the Derwin James injury you were talking about, Derwin James, Nasir Adderley, and then it was Rayshawn Jenkins. And obviously Rayshawn Jenkins played his fair share of time, stepped in for Derwin James for the entirety of the 2020 season, got paid and went to Jacksonville.
Actually, and he played quite well, deserved the money, good for him.
Now Alohi Gilman is essentially being elevated. He has a season under his belt. He's going to have a full training camp. Yes, he's a little bit more of that tweener. To me, it's hard to put where you'd exactly say what the ceiling is for Alohi Gilman because the expectations aren't sky high. I don't think that there's anything spectacular that we're expecting to see from him, maybe other than his contributions on special teams. And obviously he'll get some work, most likely in the money backer role or being in certain sub packages. But where I think that he's going to benefit from development is with this new coaching scheme. If you can tell me that they're going to play him the similar way that they did for him in college, what he does best, and you do that in a sparing fashion to give either Derwin or Nasir Adderley just time to take it down off and breathe. But if you say, okay, you can come off the field, and for this play, we're going to put Alohi Gilman in a position to where he knows that he's going to benefit. Then I could see it being beneficial to him. But it's we're talking one play here, one play there, nothing from a long standpoint of starting unless we're talking about an unfortunate injury.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think his absolute ceiling would be if he could ever become somewhat similar to what Adrian Phillips was for us, like that's a huge win. Like Adrian Phillips was never like the starting, free safety, strong safety, but he was kind of like that tweener Swiss Army knife that we use all the time. And he was great for us before he went to New England. Yes. I still wish we did not let him go.
Fantastic for us on special teams as well. Yeah, I think that's a great comparison, Dan. You give me the ceiling of Adrian Phillips, I would accept that. And I know that Brandon Staley has said throughout all of his press conferences that he's always excited. Obviously, he's always excited when you name him about a player. When you tell him about a player, hey, your 7th round pick this year, you excited for him? It's like, yeah, I'm really excited for him. Obviously, he's going to say he's excited for his starters, but he did single out in an interview when asked about him, as far as it related to the safety position, that he was really excited about Alohi Gilman. So whatever that possibly means, whether that means that you're strengthening up the depth of this team, or how you can properly utilize him to make him succeed, it's a win-win for Alohi Gilman for the opportunity that he's getting here.
Now, I think we should. I'm going to save Mark Webb for last. And the reason why is because I believe Ben DeLuca, who probably most folks don't necessarily they may not have heard of him. In my opinion, he is very similar and looked a lot like what Alohi Gilman looked like coming out of Notre Dame. For those who don't know, Ben DeLuca, 4-year starter, also 2-time team captain for, I think, UNC Charlotte. I think they're actually the Charlotte 49ers. He went undrafted, and I don't think he even went 1 hour before he got the call from the Chargers and ended up signing as an undrafted free agent. Led his school all-time in tackles. And get this, Jake, do you think he had 9 fumbles forced in college? Like, that's great for a safety. Really good instincts, good smarts. Again, it reminds me of Alohi Gilman coming out of college, kind of a spitting image, to be honest. Very, very productive, and I'm sure you'll get into this for a second. Very productive, very versatile, but I think his athleticism is what's going to kind of set him back. And that was the same thing with Alohi Gilman, but I think Ben DeLuca is more so.
Yeah, have you seen the accolades and awards that Ben DeLuca has won over his college career? I mean, it reads like, it reads like someone who's had 8 jobs in 6 years. I mean, it's just down the list, man. I mean, he's definitely made a good reputation for himself during his time at Charlotte. And I kind of agree with you a little bit as far as the similarities that he looked like when we were talking about the difference between him and Alohi Gilman when he was coming out of college. But yeah, the athleticism is the biggest knock on Ben DeLuca. I think where he wins is that he has a lot of the intangibles that you'd want from a safety, as far as having those instincts, knowing when to close, knowing when to come downfield. Those are the biggest things that really save face for his play. But the athleticism that when you truly need it from a safety, that you need to make a play, that's where his biggest weakness is. And it's interesting. I found it interesting that you chose to go with him starting now and leaving Mark Webb to last, because we have certain ones of these positions, and the last time I think we brought up this topic was on for the interior defensive line is, hey, can we see a undrafted free agent at that position making this roster? And I believe that's the case that you're going to make here, and it's for a good reason, because the safety position is one position that, even still to right now, us talking about this, is the one position that everybody feels that we could use a little bit more depth for. We asked Chris Harry about that last week. And we don't know what's going to happen between now and the start of the regular season, who these surprise cuts are going to be, who's going to make the rosters or not from other different teams, who's going to become available. So, yes, from a surface level standpoint alone, I'll say this. I don't see the Chargers keeping 5 safeties if we're talking about these 5. If we're talking about another veteran presence that they may sign before start of training camp, then yes. I really don't see them keeping more than 9 defensive backs total when you add in the rest of the cornerbacks as well. But Ben DeLuca, again, it's an interesting prospect. Is it a depth piece? Yes, it's nothing more than that. And I think when you look at the accolades that he did at Charlotte for the type of production that he put up, and unfortunately you can't teach athleticism. You can't teach speed, which unfortunately, again, is one of his weaknesses. But those instincts as a safety are also certain things that you can't teach either. And those are what he has going for them. So is it a long shot? Absolutely. For him to make this final roster, as we sit here today, I say that he's one of the prime candidates that you could say that you could end up putting on the practice squad. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And the one thing I am curious about as we kind of get moving towards training camp and into preseason is starting to look at, what this coaching staff values more. And I'm sure everyone's going to kind of give an answer where we value both athleticism and intelligence. But like if I look back at his defenses back when he was with the Broncos and the Bears, and then obviously with the Rams, like they had stud athletes. Like Jalen Ramsey is smart, but he's also like a bona fide athlete. Like Aaron Donald, you can't find anybody more athletic than him. There's a lot of folks that kind of had that athleticism plus that they were able to teach up. I don't necessarily know if that is a Ben DeLuca. And so I think because of the similarities I see in him and Alohi Gilman and him not having kind of upside athleticism, I think you're right. I think he probably is the kind of the one on the bubble. And that's because of who we're going to talk about next. And you've heard a lot of folks in the organization. You've heard a lot of players talk about him. You've heard folks covering the team talk about him. Mark Webb out of Georgia. Jay, I really, really like what he does. And I think he was such an underrated pick for this team.
Yeah, I would say that too. And, for a guy who was a 7th round pick, you normally don't say that. At most you say, okay, this guy's going to come in. He's going to be a camp body, nothing more. But again, he's being much like Alohi Gilman, and he's being thrust into a very interesting opportunity here. He's going to be a key piece as far as depth goes to this safety group. And for Mark Webb, you're talking about a player that, again, you're going to start to hear this. Stop me when you're starting to hear the trend. Versatility. Think about this. We've already been talking about the versatility between Derwin James and Nas Adderley and what they can do in this defensive scheme. And now you add another versatile player like Mark Webb coming into this. And I'm not just talking about versatility as it relates to what he can play as far as the safety position goes. Again, this guy is another contributor on special teams. This is where he's going to cut his teeth first and foremost. When it comes to having a guy in this part of the draft in the 7th round that you're taking that is capable of playing, the slot position or the dime backer position, the strong safety position, whichever you want to call it, to find a guy who, and again, we're talking about coming from a Georgia group that was just insane for their defensive back talent that they had in 2020. And Mark Webb was a key contributor to all of that. I love Mark Webb's attitude. I love the way that he approaches the game. Again, he's not the most athletic type of safety. He's not the most productive type safety, but don't tell him that, dude, because he sure as hell doesn't believe it. He knows what he can do. And you put him with this coaching staff and get a little bit more refinement. Again, special teams first, but having a guy like this to have this type of versatility, I'd be interested to see, especially during the preseason, what Mark Webb is going to do. And even in certain situations where you're going to give Derwin or Nas a break, I'm very excited to see where they would actually put him, because it may not just be at the safety position, which would be really interesting.
Yeah, he is one of those kind of not necessarily a freak athlete, but he's one of the types that he is both physical and he can cover. And when you look at kind of that like nickel corner safety star hybrid kind of position, you play the nickel, you play the slot, you're blitzing, you're in coverage, you're tackling. Like, you need to be able to kind of do all of those things. And although you mentioned it, he wasn't that productive while at Georgia. It's because it was absolutely loaded. He is a very good player. He's kind of like that do-it-all Swiss Army knife kind of player that we talked about before. The coaching staff, like I mentioned, they all love him. He plays more of like that strong safety role, like up in the box, underneath. When I was doing some homework on this, Jake, I went back to the Senior Bowl, And there was a rep during practice where he went up against Amari Rodgers and just absolutely blanketed him the entire time up to and through the end zone. The guy never had a chance. He has played the star position actually in Georgia. He actually talks about it a few times. He played it all in 2019 is actually where he had the most production. I think Mark Webb has the chance to be that kind of safety too. Like, I think he's going to be the one, if one of the guys needs a breather, if one of the guys is going to be going down, whatever. I think Mark Webb is the one who's probably going to be the next man up at that strong safety position. Or I guess you want to call it money. I think it's Mark Webb.
If you go back and you look at you listen to the press conference from Tom Telesco just after the closing of the NFL draft, he had gotten a question from a reporter saying, asking him who he felt the steal of his draft was. Now, us being fans, you could say it was Rashawn Slater, you could say it was Asante Samuel Jr., whatever you want to say about it. He didn't necessarily, he highlighted a lot of his day 3 picks. Didn't say the word steal, but he went on a nice rant about Mark Webb. And the quote that he actually said was, for a 7th round pick to play for a college like Georgia and play a lot of different roles in the secondary against great competition. And he says, I know 7th round picks are hard for those guys to make the team, but we think that he has some traits that can translate to do what we do well, what we do on defense, whether it's outside, corner, nickel, which he played a lot of safety. So again, this just shows you the versatility that you find in a 7th round pick. And I thought again, it's early. You like to hear these type of things. And we're not talking about guys that have necessarily, snapped the football yet, but for a guy like that in a 7th round in a position that is not the deepest for this team, this is a great opportunity for him. Not just the way that he plays the game, an opportunity for him to get on the field in more ways than one, but more importantly, for the spot that he landed in for this coaching staff to develop him properly.
I couldn't think of a better situation for a 7th round pick with his potential to land on than a team with Brandon Staley, Renaldo Hill, and Derwin James helping you kind of get coached up as your career starts. Like you can't ask for more than that. I love what he brings. I think his potential is higher than most on the secondary, and I think we're going to see more of him than people are expecting. Like, I think people are thinking it's going to be a ton of Nas and Derwin, which like it will be, but I guarantee you we're going to see more of Mark Webb than we did of Alohi Gilman last year. Like, guaranteed.
Oh, there's no question there, Dan. And you're not the only one. Gavino Borges, for anybody that reads Chargers Wire, is extremely high on Mark Webb this year. And even he predicts that Mark Webb is going to make an impact defensively early on. He says, don't be surprised by it. So you're not the only one. Again, I think that you're talking about a versatile defensive weapon, here's for a good example. I posed the question to Chris Harry last week when I was talking about the possibility of Kaiser White stepping in an emergency safety situation because he played that position in West Virginia. Now, I know we've always known him as a linebacker, and he's done well since he's been in the league. But Mark Webb could be your versatile chess piece of where you want to play him, whether you're talking the corner position or whether you're talking the safety position. And at the same time, this could actually give you more flexibility for roster spots. I mean, think about how this opens up a plethora of different situations here. So, I think that there's something to denote here when you go back and you look at his college career in Georgia, what he was able to do, and again, most of all, his versatility. I think that this is a great situation for him.
I think this guy is more likely to be like an Adrian Phillips than the others, and so for that reason, I love what he brings. I think his versatility is key. The fact that he can do special teams is really important. The fact that he can do many things well. I'm high. I am on the front row seat of the train for Mark Webb. Although,
are you Nasir Adderley high on the train?
I'm not quite that high. But for a 7th round pick, we did pretty darn good.
Not too bad. Not too bad.
So that's going to do it for the safety position. Now, I guess, Jake, so we've talked about 5 guys here today. We've talked about Ben DeLuca, Alohi Gilman, Mark Webb, Nas Adderley, and Derwin James. Of the 5, do we both agree that 4 is the most that make this team active roster?
4 is the most that makes this team. And again, it may not even be the 4 of the 5 guys we talked about today. We don't know what's going to happen, but this is a position to watch for undoubtedly over the period of training camp through preseason. Keep your eyes peeled for who's going to be a surprise cut, so to speak, from other teams, and who's going to become available. Because we all know it happens every single year. And if someone of very high talent comes available, am I talking now? Let me temper expectations here. Am I talking about starter caliber position that you would replace Nas Adderley with? No, I don't believe that that's who we're looking for. But you definitely need more veteran depth in this position, because that's where it's lacking tremendously.
Like a Malik Hooker type?
Whether it was a Malik Hooker, even though I know that, if he could stay healthy, he could be the starting safety on anybody's team right now. But if that's a situation that arises, who knows what's going to come with him. I think for Malik Hooker, I think he'll hold out for a starting job. So you may not see him get signed until closer toward the end of the season, or maybe it is, week 3 and a big injury situation comes down and then he ends up signing with a team. So as much as I know that guys would love to see that combo, I think that he would be holding out more for a starting position given from where he came from with the Colts. So again, I'm thinking veteran experience. You got to have some more veteran experience back here with the depth of this team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the next few weeks of training camp and, of course, the preseason before the start of the season.
Whew! Another position battle down. We have done interior defensive line. We have done corner. We have done tight ends. We have done running backs and now safety. We have other positions coming soon. Jake, this has been fun. I cannot wait. We are so freaking close to training camp starting. Like I can almost taste it.
I don't even want to do any more training camp position battles just because I want the topic to be, not because I'm sick and tired of doing this with you. I just want the topic to be over. Give me July 27th right now so I can talk about what the guys are doing in pads on the field today. Thank you very much.
Please and thank you. For those who are coming in for the first time and have made it this far, thank you so much for listening to us. You can find us on Spreaker, on Spotify, on Apple iTunes podcast, YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. If you feel we deserve a 5-star rating on podcast, we'd love one. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And we will see you next time on Chargers Unleashed.